Windbreaks and shelter belts have many benefits. Traditionally, shelter belts have been established for stock shelter during extreme weather. Following the 2015 Pinery fire, we heard from our landholders and farmers how shelter belts and native vegetation impacted on fire behaviour and wind patterns across the Adelaide Plains and lower mid-north.
On the day of the fire here, we decided to stay and defend the home. Fire burnt right up to the house. So since the fire, we've actually started to regen and replant. I had a look around them and really started to study the trees that actually survived, and then asked the question, why did they survive and everything else didn't?
But I'd really like you all to ask questions. It's designed around shelter belts, but a lot of your plantings may be for shade, for making you feel better, for your gardens, for reefs or natural bush, so just ask. Today we're going to discuss the most important issues about shelter belt planting, and in reality that's good planning, and think about your property as a whole and what do you want to achieve into the future. Shelter belts have many benefits. They can provide biodiversity, they can provide fantastic bird habitat, they can harbour insects that will attack the pests in your crops. You'll get higher wool growths from sheltered sheep. Dairy cows have definitely shown an increase in milk production if they're not so cold. Crops will increase near the shelter belts, and you decrease the evaporation across the paddock. The shelter belts decrease the wind speeds and therefore your erosion reduces. Shelter belts should be placed at right angles to the prevailing winds. Make sure that you don't have too many gaps. You can get wind tunnelling, you can get increased velocities. So if you can't place a gate at the end of a windbreak, you may need to redesign the ends of those windbreaks to decrease that impact of the tunnelling wind. If you have a solid wall of trees, it acts like a brick wall. The wind will hit it, go up over the top and cause turbulence on the other side. So that becomes a bigger problem than what you had before you had the trees. If you're going to have a very simple shelter belt, you need it to be permeable. The wind needs to go through it. So that decreases the speed of the wind and less turbulence all the way through. The composition of a shelter belt should include small shrubs on the outside rows, slowly building up to the largest tree row in the centre, 5 rows wide. The species that you would be planting are usually local species that have the right form for the position in the shelter belt. It could be a eucalypt or a she oak, and of various permeabilities, but in general the outside rows are closely planted bushy shrubs.
This one's a acacia pendula, and I got about 15 trees that I specifically went and got.
If you can't use local species, you can't get enough height, look for a plant that will do the job but won't become a weed.
The dryland tea tree, or the melaleuca, prevented fire in and around our farm, in our farm buildings and in another location.
At least a year ahead, you need to look at ripping your land, starting your weed control and ordering your plants. Ripping means that you can get good subsoil moisture and a lot of root development once you've planted your trees. You need to make sure that you have air pockets taken out of that rip line, so that's why it's important to have a year ahead. In this region and the agricultural areas of South Australia, it's really beneficial to plant before the break of the season in April or autumn. The reason is that the soil's still warm and you can water before the break, and those trees will get roots into the ground and get established before it gets too cold to grow. That means that when it starts to dry out in the following summer, they're less needy of water.
And so the planting, and this planting was the first planting after the fire, went in on irrigation in about February last year. Plants came from the Barossa Bush Gardens, and so the Barossa Bush Gardens supplied all of the plants from here.
Shelter belts are a big investment on a property, but they're a wonderful compromise for planting. They provide so many benefits for the property, the habitat for animals and birds and reptiles. It's well worth looking at putting in shelter belts. You'll be better off in your bank balance and the environment will be better off in the long run.
In 2016 and 2017, landholders were given free native plants, tree guards and stakes to help rebuild native vegetation across the fire scar.
Okay, Chris, what was your aim? Was it to get height through here?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a bit of height in here, particularly like with this sort of, that's a Comagelentus, river red gum type, quite a tall tree, quite a big bit of structure coming off the edges. And that's a mix between that and the, say, a she oak that I've got here, and a pendula, which is a nice sort of taller tree here. But I'm really just trying to get the sort of structure in the actual windbreak and help that develop.
And you're using your Melaleuca as a really good wind barrier, which you saw was successful in the fire, in diverting the flow of the fire.
Certainly the Melaleuca, that once it shrubs up, formed quite a nice break in other areas, so we're pretty keen to sort of see that planting come back in. Hopefully we never see another pinery, but we just want to make sure that if we are planting and planting trees, we're planting and planting for the next potential event.
For more information about how we can support you, please head to our website.